Hello and welcome to this new video about Stellar. Today we're going to talk about ICOs and especially token issuance. So the term ICO is a bit misleading because we are only going to speak about the easiest part of an ICO, which is to create the tokens. And this is particularly simple using Stellar. So this video will be in two parts. The first part will be about explaining the principle of how you issue new tokens on Stellar. And in the second part, we'll play a bit with the code and see how we can do that with the JavaScript SDK. Just to mention also that an ICO is much more than issuing a token. With ICOs, you may have to have a lot of marketing work, product work, legal work, administrative work. So this is much more than this. And we're going to focus only on the easiest part of it. In our example for today, we're going to speak about ERC20 kind tokens, meaning that these are fungible tokens, and also it's going to be a token that has a limited amount, meaning that the quantity of this token is set forever. So to do that with Stellar, first you need two accounts. One will be the issuing account, and the second one will be the distribution account. And I'm going to explain later on why this is the case. Actually, it's going to be obvious. The first thing you want to do is that the distribution account has to create a Trustline with the issuing account to be able to receive tokens from the issuing account. The second step will be for the issuing account to create the new assets. So assets are the names of these tokens, if you want, in the Stellar world. It's created out of nothing. Like it's literally, I'm creating a new asset for this account. After that, this issuing account will send these tokens to the distribution account. So it's just a matter of transferring the balance from one account to the other. And after that, the whole point is to lock the issuing account so that no new token can be created from this account, because the issuing account is by definition what the token is. A token is a symbol and an issuing account. So if you lock the issuing account, if even the private key of the issuing account is not able to create anything or to do any operation afterwards, it means it's locked forever. And therefore, the token itself cannot be created anymore. And the value of it might not be dissolved in more token creation. And after that, it's very simple. The distribution account just has to sell on the network using the different operations that are proposed by the Stellar network to create sell orders. For example, I'm selling my cherry token for this amount of Stellar, and this is what I want. Okay, so after that, we're going to create a very small example using the JavaScript SDK. All right, so I already have prepared a few files in this repository. I already installed the Stellar SDK, and I've got a config file with the three accounts I want to use: the issuer, distributor, and buyer, and the server URL. I also have a balance script that is here to display the balances of these accounts. Okay, to fund those accounts, I used the Stellar laboratory. You simply generate a key pair on the testnets, and you can even fund those accounts with a fund bot directly. So this is what I'm doing now. For example, taking this public key and exploring the endpoints. As you can see, we see the balance of the native asset, which is 10,000 by default. That's what the fund bot gives you. Okay, so let's try this. Balances works. All these accounts have been funded with 10,000 Stellar lumens. So the first thing we want to do is to create the trust line. We want the distributor account to have a trust line towards the issuer account. So that's what we're going to do now. So I'm going to lazily copy some of the imports I had from the balance.js file. And let's create our main function. So we want to first import the So we want to first create the transaction options. It's going to be fairly standard. It's going to be always the same. We want to fetch the fee from the server, which is usually 100 stroops. And we are going to also add a small option, which is actually very important. That is the network passphrase. As we use the testnet, we have to add this passphrase to the options. Okay, so it's one of the constants that are exposed by the framework, by the SDK. The next step is to pull the distribution accounts. Under the hood, what happens is that we also pull other informations like the sequence number of a given account. Each account has a sequence number. Each transaction, each action will increase this sequence number. So it's why it's important sometimes to pull those accounts to make sure that we have the latest transaction, because it's part of the transactions. Okay, the next thing is that we're going to specify our assets. So the bread asset we want to have from the issuer account will be called, for example, the bread assets. And this is how we define an asset. It's simply a symbol, for example, BRD for bread, and an issuer public key. So that's how you define an asset with Stellar. It's very, very simple. And now we are going to create our Trustline specification, Trustline options. So the asset we want to trust is the bread asset. And we want a limit of 1,000. So you can specify limits for a given asset you want to have. This is one of the options we have. So let's say it's 1,000 now. Let's create our transaction now. All right, so the transaction will be using the distributor accounts. Let's call it the distributor accounts. It's much better. And the transaction fee will be the standard one. And we're going to add an operation to that, which will be the change of trust. It's an option of an account. So it's going to be a change trust operation, and we are going to pass our change trust options objects to this method. The set timeout is set to 0, which means that this transaction is valid anytime. It can be applied anytime. Now we're going to sign this transaction with the private key of the distributor accounts. Okay, let's execute this function. So first, our balance are still here, and let's change this trust line. Oops, something went wrong. Okay, small mistake. It's going to be server.fetchBase. Okay, so it worked. Okay, let's add that to the Git history. So I will share a link in the description below with the link to this repository. Next step, we are going to create the assets. So I'm going to lazily copy again the imports I had from the previous file. So we are going to first pull the issuing accounts. Same thing, we want to get the sequence number under the hood. Then we are going to declare our assets. Same thing, I'm going to just copy from what I had before. It's just a declaration, a name or a symbol, and a public key. That's all it takes. The next thing we want to do is also to have the right options. They are fairly standard. It's going to be always the same. And in the end, this is what we're going to do. We're going to simply make a payment. That's all what it is. These are the 4 more important lines of this script. It's about creating a new payment from the issuer with this brand new asset to the destination. So as you see, there is no kind of creation per se. We simply pay directly the distributor from the issuer with the right balance of these assets. So now let's create a transaction. So it's a transaction issued by the issuing account with the standard options, and the operation will be a payment. Same again, the timeouts at 0. We don't care for that for now. And let's build. And let's sign this transaction with the issuing account private key. And submit that to the network. Okay, let's see if it works. Okay, let's check the balances, and there you go. The distributor has received our bread token. Woohoo! And you can see also the 100 strups that the issuer has paid before and the distributor now. Okay, so we'll have to commit this new change. And the next step will be to lock the issuing accounts. This is the whole point of, I would say, an ICO. When you want a limited amount of tokens, is that the issuer cannot create more of those tokens, cannot send more to the distributor. So that's what we're going to do now. So first we pull the issuing account. It's starting to be pretty standard. You will see this pattern happening all the time. Let's lazily copy the transaction options, which are always the same. And now it's time to use the thresholds. So thresholds are some sort of a property of given Stellar accounts. And you can specify the weight of the signatures. And typically by setting the master weight to 0, we mainly say, oh, now the signature with the private key of the account, so the private key associated with the public key of this account, has no more weight, meaning that it has no more rights per se. It will simply block any transaction being signed with the private key of this account. Then we specify also the low thresholds, the medium threshold, and the high thresholds to 0 as well, completely locking down all the possible transaction that could be tried. So the low, medium, and high thresholds corresponds to the weight of different type of transactions. Typically, a payment or a change of trust might not have the same weight, and you can specify how many signature you need and what are the weight for all of these. But now it's very simple. We set everything to 0. Okay, let's create the transaction now. So it's going to be, when it works, the latest transaction we can do. And the operation will be a change of trust. An option, sorry. So it's a change of option. It's going to be the threshold. And then same thing, the timeout at 0. And the signature, last signature with the issuing account private key. And submit this transaction to the network. Again. Okay. So let's try. Oh, small problem. Not a big deal. That might be a new missing somewhere. Okay, new transaction builder. Let's try again. Okay, worked. So let's see the balances. Nothing's changed, which is fine, except that the issuer now has 200 troops less. We shouldn't have let all this balance in the issuer because now this account is locked with this money. Well, sorry, with this balance. But anyway, it's just a test. Let's commit that. Okay, so the next step is to distribute those new tokens or these new assets. So for that, we're going to use the distributor accounts. Let's copy lazily our previous imports. So we're going to pull the distributor account from the horizon, from the network. We declare our bread assets and the transaction options because this is something that we see all the time. We need each time. And now we're going to specify the managed sell offer options. So it's one of the operations. So we're going to sell as a distributor the bread assets, and we're going to buy Stellar lumens, so the native assets. So that's your offer. The amount we are selling is 1,000. Say, because that's what we decided. We decided that 1,000 was even the limit of what we could have. This is the maximum. And the ratio will be that we want 1 stellar element for 1 bread asset. Now let's build this transaction. And add the operation. So it's going to be a manage sell offer with the options we just set previously. Let's sign this transaction. And submit it to the network. Let's try that. Okay, so it works. So we're going to commit that before going to the next step. Okay, next step. We simply want to purchase those tokens we just created. So we're going to create a new file. Okay, same thing, we'll import the standard dependencies and all. Now this time we're going to pull the buyer accounts. Lazily copying the assets name and the transaction options. So the whole thing with buying a new token is to first add the new Trustline. So this is one of the things we want to do. Let's say that we have a Trustline for the bread assets on our buyer accounts with a limit of 500. We could be to the end, but let's make it 500. And then we are going to do the same. It's a managed sell offer option. So this time we are selling native assets, which are Stellar tokens, and we are buying the bread token. And the amounts will be as specified before. Let's say that we want 1, and the price will be as specified by the seller, will be 1 for 1. And let's build the transaction. So this time the buyer is initiating this transaction. Same options as usual. So the first option will be the change of trust with our options. And the second one will be the sell offer. There you go, signing the transaction with obviously the buyer accounts. With obviously the buyer secrets. Oh, it's not a method. And submit that to the network. Okay, let's try. So the balances are still fine. We've got the buyer with 0 bread tokens. Oh, small issue, sequence number. That might come from the way we load the buyer's accounts. There might be a small mistake. Oh yeah, we are not waiting, so okay. Let's try again. Okay, seems to be working. So what is the balance of those accounts now? There you go. The buyer has 1 bread token and the distributor has 999. So it worked, and if you try again, it still works. So there you go. We've got it. And I hope you enjoyed that. And I hope you learn how to do an ICO, at least the simplest part of it. So I'm going to commit the latest of this version, and you will find the repository in the link below. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to subscribe to this channel, and see you in the next one.